Big week in the markets, guys.
Yeah, it might be. I think this is going to be interesting for the exchange. Actually, now that there's some big, I could see guys being motivated to start throwing some more bids around and just trying to establish level. Right. You can do it in real time with multiple buyers, multiple sources. The exchange is a fantastic tool for that in today's market, I think.
That's a great concept and observation. We're going to talk a little bit about this week in the transactional side of the business. Hopefully Ashley will cover that in his market update. But certainly we saw it in the industry blogs. We saw it in our own velocity of activity. And it's fun to talk about the concept of what the open exchange can do in terms of visibility for all that. So that's a fun discussion to have. We'll go through that here in just a second. I've got some other stats for you too, just to bring you up to speed.
Yeah, Paul, I don't want to steal your or Asher's thunder, but I'm not sure how closely people pay attention to what's happening on the screens, because we know screen real estate's an issue for everyone. But intraday on Wednesday, I think we had a combination of 250 or 270 trucks, which meant that there was a lot of turnover, to Chris's point, where we're seeing people put up bids and offers and then lowering the offers and raising their bids more recently than at any time, to be honest. And I think Ash and Paul can touch on that some more as well.
And we will. And before we get started here, Todd, can you hear me okay? I see you on there. Just want to test your mic.
Yes. Good morning.
Perfect. Very good. Thank you. Okay, well, I think I'm going to get started. It's 5 after 10. We've given people enough time to join here. Let me share my screen. And let me bring this up. And can you guys see that full screen PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's get started. And as people start to arrive here a little bit more, I'll just let them in as we go. Good morning, everybody. Smart Market call, Friday, June 11. This is our weekly call. For those of you that are new to I see some new people on the call here this morning. This is our weekly call. We run every Friday morning, 10 a.m. We talk about things about the system resources, tips and tricks. We do a visit on the market, what everyone's seeing in the marketplace today. We were just having a short discussion about that. And then we have an industry guest and speaker. And this week's speaker is Todd Dawalt. I think you're going to find it to be a very interesting conversation. Todd runs a blog and a website and a post, and runs a consulting business called the Construction Leading Edge, where he works with the builder side of the community. And we'll talk a little bit about that and the effects in the marketplace with the prices and things that you've obviously seen, and also his take on the exchange. So welcome, Todd. So this week in MX, obviously, I think the big story was the market started to soften a little bit, and we saw that across the board. We saw that all over in, as I say, the social media, in the news, on the screen itself, on the platform, and we had a huge trading week. We hit some pretty big milestones this week. I think at one point, I think it was Wednesday morning, we actually had sold 50 trucks thereabouts of Southern Yellow Pine before noon. And so, that shows you both ends of the, let me just admit these guys, that shows you both ends of the spectrum. So the market's picking up. We've got all sorts of suppliers that are now offering more product. We've got all sorts of buyers that are keen and looking some more. And as I say, 50 trucks before noon on Wednesday, that was a new high water mark for us. So thank you to everybody, and attaboy to our sales team for getting that all done. And we're going to talk a little bit about MX dashboards. I thought it would be interesting to show you just some very brief facts and figures about MX and our growth and where it's coming from. So on that, just wanted to show you. So our user community today, we've got 764 users on the platform today, 568 from U.S. buyers, 9 U.S. buyers. We're starting to expand into Canada now as Canadian buyers are starting to ask us, can we ship product to Canada? We've got 172 sellers out of the U.S. and 15 mills and sellers and distributors from Canada. So 740 on the buy side, or 740 from the US, 24 from Canada, 577 buyers on the platform versus 192. So basically 3-to-1, 3-to-1 buyers versus sellers, which is a pretty good mix. We think that's about right for where the marketplace is. And as I expand on that, just talk a little bit about who they are. On the user side, we've got about 6% of our user community are on the builder side. When I say builder, that's anybody from assemblers to turnkey builders to multifamily homes to developers. We've got another 10% roughly of component guys on the platform, actually 58 locations of component manufacturers. We've got 198 distributor or wholesale locations that are both buying and selling to the marketplace through the platform. And then finally, about 56% of our users, both on the buy and the sell side, are the LBM or pro dealer segment. And on that note, a couple of notable topics. We've got pro dealers in the top 10, the industry top 10 users, so some very, very large pro dealers that are out there. We also have last year's Pro Dealer of the Year, Townsend Building Supply out of Louisiana, is one of our new customers. And interestingly enough, out of that pro dealer marketplace, 75% of them actually belong to buying groups. So we're doing something right where these folks are belonging to buying groups, but yet they still choose to buy, shop, and look for visible market trends on the exchange. So those are just some really quick dashboard numbers to give you some flavor as to what our mix is and kind of where everyone's coming from. Another industry dashboard that we're looking at is our industry visibility. And I think I've told you all before about some of the vehicles that we're using to deliver our message. We've got This Week in Lumber every Wednesday where Ashley heads up that program. We do lunch with lumbermen on Thursdays at 1 o'clock. I'm starting to refer to Ashley as our James Brown. He's the hardest working man in the business right now, and we're proud to have him. So on Wednesdays and Thursdays, we've got those two deliveries. Of course, we've got our LinkedIn page where that's kind of our home page of sorts. Of course, we have a website, but the LinkedIn page is really becoming our main distributor of information. And then finally, we've got our YouTube channel, and the lovely Jory Wisniewski is our keeper of the key of all those social media platforms, and she's doing a huge job. And you'll see that just alone, This Week in Lumber is just a huge hit. We've actually had 1,100 attendees from all over the United States and frankly all over the world on that call. We've had 451, and this is in single sessions, by the way, 450 attendees on our Lunch with Lumbermen show. And we just eclipsed the 2,000 follower mark on our LinkedIn side of the business. So Mike Wisniewski kind of drew a line in the sand when we first started marketing the company, saying we are a digital company. We are going to behave and act all things digital, including our marketing. So at the beginning, when we were starting to analyze our marketing strategy, we looked at the lumber trade, magazines and the traditional print and various other kinds of forms of marketing, and we just made the decision to go all digital. And you can see the effectiveness, and you can see the growth that we're having on that platform. So it's very exciting. I'm a little bit more of an old school guy, so I'm sold. I'm completely sold and enamored and intrigued by how this digital platform is evolving. As we said before, you've seen this slide before. All of this transmits to sales growth. This is the equivalent of our quarterly truckload volume. You can see the monthly volume on the left, and you can see the quarterly volume on the right. And I highly suspect that Q3 of this year, you're going to see that bar jump dramatically. So with that, that's just kind of an overview of what's going on in the market, a little bit of an overview of us, how we're growing, in what segments, what kind of velocity and traction you're seeing us get in the market. And as Judy said, it's fun to watch the new ideas fly around. It's fun to watch the success. I think we're all excited about, what can be, and a lot of us don't even know what could be yet. But anyway, there we sit today. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to talk a little bit about the market this week, and maybe he can expand a little bit on some of the sales velocity and some of the unique transactions he saw and some of the interactions he had with some of the industry leaders on his shows this week. Ashley, there?
Sure, you bet, Paul. Can you hear me?
Yep, very good.
As James Brown said, I just thank God for all the blessings, right? So glad to be on the calls. And just, Paul, real quick, kudos to you. I get a lot of calls from industry experts, from the C-suite all the way down along the chain that compliment you as far as what you're doing. A couple people have said that guy really prepares for this. He must have done this before, which obviously, Paul, you have. And I just want to say it doesn't go unnoticed by us and everybody else. You do an amazing job. So as Paul mentioned, we've had a lot of engagement on our sites. We started going with YouTube Live yesterday, and we're going to start increasing our engagement rate by getting out to more venues on these shows. One thing that's interesting, I had a call yesterday morning walking in at about 6 in the morning. A guy said to me, "Hey, can my current suppliers have a phone call every Thursday morning where we dial in? And can you do something like that?" So we're still working the deal between people using the new technology and the fax machine conference calls, right? So we're trying to bring everybody together, and that's a challenge, but we'll do that. So as Paul and Joe mentioned, we did 50 trucks on one day. What are some of the interesting matches that we did? A lot of 4x8, 4x9, 4x10 OSB, and here's what's interesting about it. Some stuff from Florida is going up to Nebraska. Some stuff from New Jersey is going down to Florida. So what that does in a digital market is it's called arbitrage. The market finds its own way to bring in misalignment, right? Human beings can't physically do that on a phone because they don't talk to most of the people. They have their 5 or 6 people they talk to, and a digital market's just more efficient. So what did we talk about on the calls this week? We talked about some new mills coming online. So our one big mill made an announcement that they're going to greenfield a mill down south. And they were one of the same people that said they'd never build another mill. We also talked about more shipments out of Canada coming into the US in the first quarter and more lumber being produced in Canada in the first quarter, which we never thought would ever happen in Canada, but it did. And it just kind of shows you how when prices go up, people find economic reasons to cut more lumber when they may not have in the past. The interesting thing was the southern market was down, and we think that was because of the storms in the first quarter. We also talked about the number 1.3 versus 1.7, how many houses are estimated to be built and how many are actually being built. If you were on those calls, you'd see that there's a lot of things holding it back from 1.7, and the actual that's going to probably get built is around 1.3. So what does that mean? That means if people are buying lumber and buying product for 1.7, but only building 1.3, there's a mismatch there. Talked a little bit about Katerra. We also talked about the home centers. One of the comments on that was, please don't ship me any 8-footers. So what that means is if home centers slow down, that's one of their biggest items. People don't want 8-footers because 8-footers are starting to show up everywhere. Another comment was, don't expect this next market to have all of the euphoria from the do-it-yourself people. As we actually go back to work, which everybody is, they're leaving their houses and going back to offices now. They're leaving their houses and going to Disney World. And Matt Lehman is a good prognosticator of this. He mentioned this, and Matt's on the call. Hey, Matt, he mentioned this a few weeks ago, months ago, that people aren't going to build that deck if they want to get out of their house now. They're going to spend that money there. So I think we also talked about with the people on the call that the home centers are pushing back on the product. They're going to the low end of their contracts, and it is slowing down. So the do-it-yourself stuff isn't going to be there. So if everybody thinks that we're going to have this euphoria going forward on that, we probably aren't. We're getting more of a we're starting to get a market more in line. Mills started making outgoing calls this past few weeks. They hadn't done that in months. They had 6-week order files. You were never going to see it again. Now all of a sudden they're making calls, secretly asking if people can help them with something. All right, so that tells you a lot. A lot of deals were done this week. I mean, there was volumes of trucks done. We did 50 on that one day. I heard of 100, 200 truck blocks going through on a regular basis on Pine. And then we talked about the difference between print price and the high trade price, because we were talking, Matt and Alayman and I, about 2x6 was being done $200, $300, $400 off the high trade price. Big difference between the high print price, right? Don't give away your power. We talked about that. When you're buying from somebody as a retail buyer or anything, we talked a little bit about knowing where the market was. Materials exchange kind of helps you see where it's at. And if you're using our platform on a dual trading model, look and bid on here or look and offer on here, and then go back to your supplier, and don't be afraid to counter them $100 or $200 off their ask price. We've noticed a lot of buyers are afraid to do that. Put your seller in a position where they have to actually do something. So that was kind of some of the things we've seen on here. We've got a lot of matches up here working today. I see people populating some things, 4x9, 4x10, OSB, a lot of Euro being listed, and I'm noticing a lot of the Euro prices are just plummeting, which is good. I can watch them tick down here as we're speaking. So we expect to have a great day today, and we're excited about going forward. So back to you, Paul.
Very cool. Thanks, Ash. Great report, great update. It's an exciting time to be around. As I say, it's an exciting time just to be people now, they remember now that I'm in the lumber business, and they're constantly coming to me, asking me things like, when should my brother-in-law build his house, all that stuff. So all of a sudden I'm the most marketable guy around in my neighborhood. It's fun. All right. So let's take a shift and let's talk with Todd Dawalt. Todd, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here a little bit so we can get everybody on the screen. And welcome, Todd Dawalt. Mike Wisniewski is not here today. He is drowning flies, I think it is, in Wisconsin somewhere, on his annual fly fishing trip. So we're gonna miss Mike. So I'm gonna fill in and do my best. So welcome, Todd Dawalt. It's a pleasure to have you. We spoke yesterday a little bit. I was very impressed with what you do and why you do it. And I'm going to start by asking you to start there. So let's get a little bit about you and your background, and let's just talk a little bit about you for a sec.
Sure. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. A little about my background. I am a longtime construction operations guy. So started in the business in '97, spent most of my career since then as a commercial general contractor, owned my own home building and development business for a while, spent a lot of time in commercial real estate development, managing projects ranging up to $100 million senior living communities, office buildings, did a lot of work for corporate clients. And in 2014, I started this little pet project called the Construction Leading Edge Podcast to try to solve some of the problems that I was dealing with, and also to connect people in the industry. And we're creeping up on about about 1 million downloads now. The podcast, Mike was one of the interviewees a couple of weeks ago, and so now what I do is I run the Construction Leading Edge podcast, where I interview construction business owners, industry experts, try to, as I like to say, crowdsource wisdom in the construction industry. And I also work with construction business owners to, as I like to say, eliminate chaos and maximize profit. So I'm known as the systems guy for construction business owners. And over the last year or so, I've started working with more and more home builders. I have a coaching business where I work one-on-one with those folks, and a lot of them are custom home builders doing somewhere between $2 and $20 million worth of work, and I help them put systems in place in their business so they can handle this growth, this demand that many of them are experiencing right now.
Well, very good. I mean, thank you for that. So when we were talking a little bit yesterday, I was asking you about your client base and a profile of who they were. So clearly this is not large national multifamily builders. These are regional to smaller, more residential, if you would. So the average size of these builders is what? How many homes a year are they producing, and how large? How many employees do they have typically?
Yeah, I would say the typical range employees would be say 3 or 4 up to a dozen employees. Um, they're building six on the 6 homes a year. Some of the high end custom home builders. Some are building. One of my clients has 40 active projects right now in a lake community in Georgia, and they're building homes from $500,000 up to some cases $2 to $3 million, depending on the market.
Very good. And so the scope of services that you provide to these, what is the actual mission of your company, and what the scope of services that you do kind of day in, day out with them, including the various different vehicles that you have to deliver that information?
Yeah, so there's a few different vehicles. One is the podcast, which is free, and it's just a great resource for sharing stories of how people did it, how they grew their construction business. I also create master classes, as I call them. So I have a financial master class, a master class on driving bottom line profitability that's pretty in depth, and then there's one of my favorites that is the drum that I've been beating a lot for the last year, which is what I call the Get Paid for Estimates masterclass. So those are packaged up masterclasses that I run every couple of months. And then I have a one-on-one coaching program where I get on Zoom calls just like this and work with construction business owners to help them map out their goals, do strategic planning, and then help them provide the focus and accountability, and then bringing the tools and resources they need to get stuff done. And quite frankly, what I do for a lot of them is help them get out of their own way, because most of them they're their own worst enemy, and as most business owners are. Let's be honest.
I love the masterclass concept. I've attended a few of them outside of the industry. I just got solicited for Carlos Santana is just doing a masterclass on how to create wonderful music and all that. And it's a great idea for Father's Day, is delivering these master classes as gift ideas. Anyway, just a marketing thought. So let's talk about your customer base for a second. So besides, obviously, we've got this big price spike going on, and let's talk about that here in a little bit. What are the major issues that are facing kind of your clientele today, including the pricing issue? And then we'll drill down on that a little bit.
Yeah, frankly, one of the biggest issues that I'm helping my builder clients deal with is how to put the infrastructure in place to handle the demand. So one of my clients, a builder out of Atlanta, his name's John Voitas. 1 year ago, probably 1 year ago, it was he and his wife and maybe 2 other employees, and they were doing maybe six to 8 homes a year. Fast forward to today, there's been this mass exodus from the Atlanta metro area out to lake communities, and he has 40 active projects, and his team may have tripled by now. He may have 12 team members, and that requires the business owner getting out of the way, getting what's in their head into some sort of a system that non-mind readers can actually use, establishing roles and responsibilities, designing an organization, moving from an operator to a CEO. So that's what a lot of them are dealing with. I guess in general terms, what they're dealing with is how do I make hay while the sun shines? How do I handle this surge of work without killing myself, without burning myself out, and without just going out of business, quite frankly. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges that I'm helping them with. And then in the short term, it's been how do I deal with supply chain issues? Dealing with how do I protect myself from the risk of material price increases? How do I deal with scheduling this constant, very dynamic situation with materials just not being available, and also subcontractors not being available?
So let's just talk about them as a congregate. How do they buy material today? Where do they buy their lumber from today traditionally?
Most of them have a relationship with their local lumber dealer, and they'll hire a framing contractor, and they will buy the material directly from their lumber dealer.
Okay. And what is their negotiation process? What is their market awareness? How do they go about negotiating prices? how do they deal with their independent or their supply source, their local supplier?
Frankly, their market awareness is probably pretty low. And the negotiation process probably looks a lot like, here's a set of plans, give me a price, and I'll plug that number in. And that's kind of the process on the front end. I'll talk a little bit more about where those problems arise from that in a better way. But that's typically how their negotiation process goes.
All right, so let's just deal with the elephant in the room. Obviously, the pricing issue and what's been going on here over the past season. And the number one question I get all the time is, how long do you hold your prices for? How do you deal with contracts that are essentially, out of date immediately with the way the prices have escalated? Let's talk about that issue itself and how builders are responding to that. First of all, define the issue for me as far as what a builder is, and as far as how the downstream projects go, and then what are some of the solutions that they're implementing to handle that?
Yeah, if it's okay, I'll share my screen. I put together a
Sure.
bit of a flow chart to show what this looks like. Let me just bring that up. I'll show you the typical process, and then what I think works better. Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay, so here's the typical process for a builder. This is the way that worked pretty well for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Somebody approaches them, says, hey, give me a price on a house. They provide a free estimate. They use some square footage numbers, some historical data. They don't take it out to market to bid. They sign the contract with the homeowner. And after they sign the contract, then they go, well, within this contract would be a lot of allowances, plug numbers, historical data, etc. They sign the contract, and then they go through the buyout. Well, they go through the process of finalizing selections after they've signed the contract, after the customer has made the made the decision. They start construction. And in some cases, they start construction and then start finalizing selections. And when I say selections, I'm talking about everything from windows, doors, siding. They might have a design, but they don't have the materials selected: countertops, flooring, plumbing fixtures, etc. Right? So they start construction and then they buy out. The buyout process is issuing purchase orders, issuing subcontract agreements as needed, basically. Then they end up with actually what happens is after they go through this buyout process, then they come back and start to plug in the holes, plug in the allowances, and fill in the gaps that were in the original contract. And they finalize the contract and they say, all right, your flooring allowance was this, your plumbing fixture allowance was this, your cabinet allowance was this, and now your framing package allowance that we used was this. And now, after we've started construction, your actual contract amount is now, in some cases, much higher than it was. And they're having these tough conversations with clients saying, I know we signed a contract for $652,000, but and we said it would take 12 months to build your home, but now it's going to take 15 months and it's going to be a $760,000 project. And they've already started construction. The home buyer has already sold their home. They've already made commitments. And in some cases, I've had conversations where home buyers are finding out about pricing busts and pricing increases and schedule delays after they've sold their home and after they've even scheduled movers, which in some cases take a few months to get scheduled. So what's happening, the short version is home builders are getting squeezed and getting caught in the switches here. And they're finding out about material delays really late in the game. They are having to have tough conversations with customers saying your prices have gone up significantly and your project's going to take much longer. And they're losing sleep as a result of all of this. And it's causing a lot of headaches and a lot of stress. And in some cases, home builders are going into their pocket and saying, you know what, I can't go back to my customer and give them a change order. I'm just going to have to eat some, if not all, of these costs.
That's amazing to me. I can't even imagine that that's happening. But I guess so. My question to you yesterday was also, but why are people surprised by this? It's in the news. Everybody knows that prices are going up. I mean, why is this such a tough conversation?
Yeah, it's in the news, but people aren't as connected to it as we are. Certainly not home buyers. I read somebody sent me a story recently about a situation where an attorney bought a home or signed a contract for a new home with a builder, I think in Texas, and within maybe 30 days of closing, the homeowner was planning on moving in, closing on their home and moving in. And within 30 days of that, the builder came back and said, we're going to execute on our termination for convenience clause. And sorry, we're going to give you your money back. You've been a difficult customer. Maybe there were other things going on. They said it was because the customer was difficult, but they just terminated the contract and backed out of it. And this was an attorney who didn't apparently read the contract. So if an attorney is not reading their contract, even if there are material escalation clauses in there, termination clauses, I think, I don't know. I don't know why people don't know this, but one of the reasons builders get into the situation is because for a home, let's say they're signing contracts right now for homes that may start in October and be delivered a year from October. So there's a big gap between the time contracts are signed and when they're actually buying lumber. I think that's probably one of the root causes of where these problems are coming from, is the gap, the time that elapses between when the customer signs the contract and the builder is actually buying materials.
And again, let's redefine. I mean, your customer base is basically, we're talking about, construction. We're not talking mass construction here. We're talking maybe higher income people that are doing custom construction projects. These things take a little bit longer in terms of their scope. And again, we talked yesterday, maybe they're in sticker shock, but maybe they have the means to absorb it anyway. So the project remains. But, we do know, as Matt has talked about, and Ashley over the last couple of days, some projects are just plain put on hold or just canceled also because of that.
Yeah, I've heard responses that range from one custom home builder in Dayton, Ohio, shared with his homeowner that their price just went up by around $100,000, and the response was, okay, no problem. And they just stroked the check. Others on the other end of the spectrum are saying within days of signing a contract and within days of starting work, they get cold feet and say, we're going to have to put this on pause and we're going to have to wait because we can't afford it.
All right, so let's shift gears here a little bit. One last question from the audience was asking. So in terms of the builder's spend today, percentage of lumber versus percentage of labor, is the labor component remain relatively stable? And what is the availability of labor these days? COVID and all that.
Pricing of labor has been much more stable than the price of material. Availability is a challenge. One of the biggest widespread problems is getting people back to work. There's been a labor shortage in the construction industry for the last 5, 6, 8 years, but it's been exacerbated by the fact that in many cases, people are making more money by staying home, and it's tough to get people to come back to work. And so the labor situation has been hampered a bit by COVID.
Well, certainly, the big issue has been lumber supply and lumber pricing, obviously, is the big variable component in all these projects. So because of these changes and these challenges, what some of the changes that you're recommending that builders implement now? And I think that, most of the people on this call are material supply people. So I think they're interested in hearing this, but what are the 2 items you talked about, pre-construction service agreements and escalation clauses? Why don't you go through that a little bit and talk about those tools that now you're recommending to your clients that they run with?
Absolutely. Let me show you a better process. So contrasting against the typical process that starts with a free estimate, and then they sign a contract, and then all of this time elapses before they go through the buyout process. Here's what I've found to be very successful with a lot of my clients, and this is what I actually start every custom home builder I work with. If they're using the free estimate method, I tell them this is the biggest game changer for a variety of reasons. So the better process is to start off with what I call a pre-construction services agreement. Then essentially what that means is the builder, instead of doing a free estimate and spending 30, 40, 50 hours doing an estimate and then having multiple builders send these projects out to bid to all of their supply chain, the builder gets paid to do the pre-construction and estimating work. So within this pre-construction services agreement, they are doing all the selections. They're getting firm pricing from their selected trade partners and from their selected suppliers. And then before the construction agreement is executed, the homeowner knows exactly what they're getting, exactly how much it's going to cost. The builder knows exactly what they're getting, what it's going to cost. And in today's marketplace, they also know exactly how long it's going to take to get it. So lead times have changed dramatically on things like windows and plumbing fixtures and anything with computer chips, quite frankly, any sort of door hardware, et cetera. So they are going through the buyout process before the construction agreement is executed so that everybody knows exactly how much it's going to cost, exactly what's in there, and how long it will take. And then the homeowner executes the construction agreement and then immediately does whatever they need to do to lock in the pricing. So if material suppliers require a deposit or they require complete payment for the lumber package or the window package or the plumbing fixture package, they need to buy it and store it. The homeowner and the builder know that, and the home buyer can write a check for any deposits that are necessary. Schedule gets finalized, and then they start construction. So all of these gaps and allowances and contingencies and holes and plug numbers get finalized before construction starts. And this is an absolute game changer for home buyers and for the contractor, because what I've found in the past several years is that so many of the problems that builders are dealing with can be traced back to two words: free estimate. That's a much longer story, but it's in everybody's best interest for the home buyer to engage in a pre-construction agreement and pay the builder to do all of this work on the front end.
Is this a brave new world? Is this the way it's going to be moving forward, or is this just a blip?
Actually, this is the way a lot of builders have been doing it for 20 years. They just don't talk about it because, quite frankly, it's a competitive advantage to them. And there's a lot of mental blocks from builders around this because all they've ever done is free estimates, right? And what I found is that over and over and over and over, people who've tried it for the first time, it works and they'll never go back.
That's funny. The supply side of it, our lumber dealers have been doing free takeoffs forever. And, that whole component, that whole labor component of the time and energy that they put into the estimating process and doing takeoffs is very similar to what you're talking about here. All right. So again, let's talk a little bit on the buying side, the procurement, bringing this all home to materials exchange here a little bit. You've seen the exchange, you've seen the open marketplace. How does this, what are the tools that are available on the exchange? How does this affect your customers? How would they use the exchange? Do they use the exchange? Are they good candidates for the exchange? What are your thoughts on this?
I think there's a couple of ways that the exchange helps builders. Number one, the large builders who are building 20, 30, 40 houses a year, it may be in their best interest to buy material by the truckload and store it even, or just buy it directly and buy in bulk. For all builders, I see tremendous value in being on the exchange because they can get on the exchange and then check the price that their dealer is giving them. So it gives them better transparency and democratizes the lumber market for them. So instead of information being fed from fed through this channel of their dealer, they have the ability to go out and look at the marketplace independently.
The market has real defining separations, right? I mean, to be on the exchange, you've got to be able to buy full truckloads of full lengths or rail cars. I get a lot of calls from builders and home developers and multifamily guys. And usually when I mention the word rail car quantities, the whole conversation changes and they kind of shut down a little bit. So the exchange inherently by its design, full trucks, cash with shipment, full rail cars is a big delineator. But those that can buy directly are starting to look at that opportunity. And so, what is your advice for independent lumber dealers or those that, traditionally furnish that material? What is their role moving forward in terms of providing value to their builder customers? What's your best observation there?
Yeah, I was actually a business development guy doing sales for construction materials, selling to contractors. And here's what I found. One of the biggest challenges that your builder clients and frankly all contractors are dealing with is isolation. They don't know if they're doing it right. They don't know what everybody else is doing, and they don't have access to best practices because typically the only people they can talk to in their market who know what they're dealing with are their competitors. And they can't be transparent with their competitors. So one of the best ways you can build a relationship and add value with builders is to bring valuable resources to them, best practices like this. Hey, have you ever thought about using a pre-construction services agreement? It's an absolute game changer for builders and helping them with their business, helping them with their processes, not just helping them to supply material, and then providing value to them and ask them. I'll tell you, when I did one of the master classes, had an entire module on optimizing your supply chain. And what I tell all of my clients is call your lumber supplier and ask them a 2-word question. What else? What else can you do for me? What else do you have available? What am I not asking for? So I would challenge you to ask the same thing to all your customers. What else can I help you with? What are your biggest problems? And what I found is they're pretty open about talking about their problems. And the fact that you're asking will show that you care. And then you may be able to offer even more value by finding out what their painful problems are.
I appreciate that. It's the whole concept of the lumberyards staying involved, if you would, in direct truck quantities on the larger jobs. The exchange is changing some of the visibility of the supply chain now, and the market is kind of adjusting to that. You and I talked yesterday when you mentioned that a builder might want to warehouse his materials, buy in bulk and warehouse materials, and obviously that has a lot of cost there. But that also provides opportunities for retail lumberyards to become logistics providers for builders of sorts, which is a lot of what they do today, right? I mean, so I think that becomes highly visible in this market where the builders can now start to see live pricing. They say, well, what is it that these lumberyards and the distribution chain is doing for me? Well, obviously, it brings visibility to the warehousing costs and the logistics costs and the product knowledge that goes along with where that supplier fits in the supply chain. So it's a great model that's evolving. I think that the exchange is bringing visibility and forcing some of these discussions and putting pressure on the supply chain. So Mike Wisniewski always likes to wrap up with that tough question. So what is it that you're either worried about or you see out there that maybe others don't, or that you just see as a particularly poignant item in the marketplace that you'd like to close with?
Sure. So I've got a couple of resources to share after this that I think may be helpful for your builders. But here's what I see coming as it relates to you folks on the supply side. I work with a lot of software companies like Buildertrend, Co-Construct, two of the biggest names in home building. And what's happening is the expectation is that they want to close the gap between the builder and supplier. So what's coming is the expectation that your pricing, your real-time pricing, shows up in the Co-Construct cost catalog in real time, so that they don't have to go request pricing. When they buy out or bid on a project, what they want is to be able to see your real-time pricing in their software. And there are companies that are doing this currently for larger builders, but they want to close that gap. So what I would expect to see is the more you can close the gap between the builder and yourself and your pricing and get integrated into their buying process, the more value that you're going to offer and the more business you're going to get. So that's what I see coming.
I agree with that. I believe wholeheartedly that on the technology side, integration of all of these platforms, and when you look at what flows through, when it starts at the mill, logging first, but then certainly at the mill and production, at the end of the day, the mill produces these end units, which are sticks of lumber. And every one of those sticks of lumber has a length, a width, a species, a grade, etc. And that SKU data flows the rest of the way through the system, all the way through the system. And that's been a lot of what materials exchange value has provided in terms of normalizing this data, taking all this information from various different mills and suppliers and buyers, and kind of normalizing that data all the way through. And then the final chapter, of course, is how you deliver that data to the end users purchasing platforms themselves. How does that information flow through? It's all similar information. You and I talked a little bit about BIM, building information modeling, that whole concept, and how big, large multifamily projects today, if the price of 2x8s goes one way and 2x12s goes the other way, they can literally reconfigure a project just based on those links, convert that to lineal foot, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot going on there on the technology side. So I do appreciate that. So finally, just to close out, how do people get a hold of you? How do they sign up for your program? Who should be signing up for your program? And we'll close with that.
Excellent question. Let me share my screen again. A couple of places to go. One would be the Construction Leading Edge podcast. So if you want to get inside the head of builders and find out what they're really thinking, this is a great resource. There are 200 plus episodes of the Construction Leading Edge podcast. There's my website, constructionleadingedge.com. There are two specific resources that I would put in my back pocket if I were you and consider sharing with your builder clients. This is some good information you can take to them. I've put together a stack of resources to help mitigate the risk of lumber prices. So there's a material price escalation clause. There's a webinar with some real life builders and a buying group talking about how they're dealing with lumber prices. You can get that at buildermasterclass.com/lumber. Might even be valuable for you folks here on the call. And then if you want to share with your builders how they can start using the pre-construction services agreement and get paid for estimates, they can get a free training video at buildermasterclass.com/script. And they can watch the video and get 3 questions they can ask. People have actually watch this video, ask these questions, and gotten paid for an estimate on the first try. So those are just a few resources that I would like to offer with you folks.
I love it. And thank you for that. For the suppliers on the call, obviously providing value to your customer base. If you can deliver these kinds of expertise and documents and resources to your customers, that adds to that value added that Todd just described. It makes you just that much more valuable to your customers. So with that, Todd, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today. Very good conversation and great things to think about from the builder community. And with that, also, just like to thank all of the Materials Exchange users, customers, and suppliers, and certainly staff for the hard work that you're all doing. And have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you next week. Take care.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Paul.